down in our tunnels and below the hospital and things like that. Along the walls, there's 1, 2, 3 numbers on the walls. And at one point in time, you could still see the rings and the shackles and chains that were hanging from the walls. That is one of the ways they tried to control patients and residents that come completely out of control, got out of hand. They didn't know how to handle them any other way. So they shackled them to walls. We're talking inhumane, cruel treatment. If we tried that today, we'd all be in prison, like I said before. But with that time frame compared to today, with the guidelines and regulations that we have, if we have a patient or a resident that may start getting out of hand, our first and foremost thing that we want to do, get a permit, Dave, is if they start becoming agitated and that, we want to try, keep a distance, create that space so they have their own space, you have yours. But to stand here and talk with them, try to get them to calm down first, to relax them, get them to just kind of, okay, I'm calming down, I could go on with this, but thank you. I'm getting to that way. We also have some patients that it becomes to the point that I have one was coming up, hitting the block wall, go to the other side, hit the block wall. She wouldn't listen to reasoning or talking to someone, so we literally had to put her into a physical hold. And by doing so, you come in from behind, you cross the arms, and you lay your head against theirs so they're not being able to bang it around and hurt themselves. And you can only go for a minute and a half this way. Once you do, you have to release that pressure. If they continue, then you can continue again to hold until they start calming down. Now, as little brother had stated, with the tooth, we had a resident and patient that we got back. He had been at one of the homes down there in Choke, and the psychologist and psychiatrist down there wanted to actually see what was going to happen. Took him off all meds. Everything took him off. He became violent and out of hand. So they'd hurried up, sent him back to us at Choke on mental health. That evening, I'm lead worker on midnights, and one of my technicians calls me on the radio. I need help down here on this end. I'm like, all right, you're right there. I can't use his name, but his initials are CC. Never forget that man. He was getting out of control. And I tried face to face with the distance, talking to him and everything else, trying to coax him back down to the men's into the hallway instead of the women's. Well, I got a 4-letter word given to me, and I'm not going to bring it up, and I'm not going to mention it in here, and then got slugged in the face. And that's where I lost one of mine. He knocked it out. Literally snapped my head to one side, and I come back, and as soon as I did, with him not being on meds and his violent tendencies, he dove in at me, caught me in my ribs, and I went over the top of him, and I hit the floor on concrete. Well, needless to say, I also had a couple bruised ribs. But we had what we call the code orange. We call it on the radio, and everybody comes running. It doesn't matter if you're on the floor below us, same unit, whatever. They come running. Into a physical hold, trying to get him calmed down. But with this gentleman, it wasn't going to happen because he took him off all meds, and his psychosis level was off the charts. We have what we call the humane wrap. You get them inside of it, their arms come up, and the entire wrap goes around them, and it'll Velcro down in place while they're here, and you can pick them up, And it takes 6 of us, 2 on each side, 1 at the foot and 1 at the head. And they get taken, unfortunately, to what we call the restraint room. It is much more humane than what we had then. It's on a cushion, padded bed. The wrists and ankle restraints, they're all padded where it comes around, and when you're doing so, you have to make sure there's enough space so it's not cutting off circulation and causing issues. And if it continues, unfortunately, they use what they call the fifth point. It's a padded section that comes over the top that helps keep from coming up and beating their heads against the bedding. And the utmost last resort is what we call a 10-2-100. That's Ativan, Haldol, and Benadryl to get them to come down and calm down and go to sleep enough to get them to their room so they aren't becoming even more violent with hurting themselves, hurting another resident or patient, hurting a staff member, or damaging property. That right now is today's basis, where we try and talk to them first as a beginning, and then having to use a restraint and chemical restraint as the utmost last resort. That's what we would rather do, is talk them down first and get them to relax before having to go to that last resort, which any of us would hate to have happen. And part of this, there were 2 very prominent individuals who were through Lincoln Developmental Center. One was Henry Darger, who made outside art. He was one that made a lot of artwork from the out to the outsides, and that was very well known for doing so. And then, however, unfortunately, John Doe, number 24, was found in the early morning hours of October 11th, 1945 in Jacksonville, Illinois. Unable to communicate due to the fact of being deaf and mute, the teenager was labeled feeble-minded and sentenced by a judge to the nightmarish jungle of Lincoln State School and colony in Jacksonville. He remained in the Illinois mental health care system for over 30 years and died at the Sharon Oaks Nursing Home in Peoria, Illinois on November 28, 1993. And a very well-known artist. Later, a song was written by Mary Chapin Carpenter. God knows his name. And after Mary Chapin Carpenter found out about him and way he was laid to rest, she herself bought the headstone for him and had it placed in Peoria, where he now lays in rest in that area. But for many that they didn't know names to, that's how they got referred to, as a John Doe with a number behind their names. I mean, how undignifying is that? I mean, how many of us sitting here right now would like to be laid to rest with John Doe, John James, don't know, and just be left to go unknown? But Mary Chapin Carpenter found the information because the state at one time would just give you a generic last name so you could get Social Security benefits. That's how they done it. But if they did not know the individual, it was John Doe. And that's when and why that song was written. And I sat down and listened to it. And you can bring it up under Mary Chapin Carpenter, God knows his name, and you can actually listen to that song where it brings up parts of his issues and his struggles through his times, and using after God knows his name. At this point, any questions from anyone? Yes.
Can you tell us what president closed all these facilities?
2003. Our wonder former governor, George Ryan, is the one who closed it.
The president.
Oh, the president? As far as our U.S. president? Oh, shoot, now you're making me go back.
No.
02?
Bush.
Yeah, Bush.
Ronald Reagan.
Huh?
Ronald Reagan started all the paperwork and the push for closing of all these facilities.
Now,
And
that
when you
one I
talk
didn't know.
about the tunnels,
Yes.
those tunnels were put into effect in all prisons in the state of Illinois due to rapid mobility of getting from one building to another building without causing. So it just wasn't at the children's home.
Okay.
And as far as some of the things that you said are not being utilized now, I think you better go talk to some of the prisons because they still are.
I'm talking, as
I'm
far as the
retired.
prisons, I have no idea, but as far as our mental health facilities and developmental facilities, they are not.
Yeah. Well, I'm retired from the state police and I drew up all the plans between the state police for law enforcement and the Department of Corrections.
Okay.
And I can tell you exactly what's going on in these prisons.
Oh, I wouldn't doubt it with the prisons, but I mean, it, you know.
Well, the
with our-
same thing applied to the children's home like down in Grafton and that.
Yeah.
They're all operated by who?
As of right now, Department of Mental Health and Developmental.
Department of Corrections has still got their foot in there.
To a point,
That's all it
but
takes.
most of it, as far as that
There was
one goes.
one other thing that you brought up. How many children were actually transferred from Jacksonville over to Lincoln?
You know, I did, when I went through all that, because I was kind of wondering that, it actually never stated in that, the book that I used for reference at the library, in the Lincoln Developmental Center book. But I mean, I can go back and take a look and see if I can find that.
Okay. Well, I've never really heard, but is Jacksonville still operating?
No, Jacksonville is closed down. When Lincoln closed in 2002, several of the residents and patients were transferred to Shapiro. Others were then transferred to Jacksonville. And when Jacksonville was shut down, then they again split it again, because when I worked down at Choate, I had about 5 residents and 3 patients that were originally here in Lincoln. They went to Jacksonville and then down to us.
Okay.
And then some go to Murray Center.
Some had gone to Murray Center, but I mean, the good majority went to, up to Shapiro, and a good portion of them, and that had come down to Choate there in Annex, Virginia, Illinois.
You know, they didn't give the kids out there very much credit on their farming ability.
No, they didn't, but they did a heck of a
Because
job.
like State Farm there at Vandalia for the
Mhm.
adults, they also grew all the vegetables and beef and all that for all the prisons. And they cross-referenced everything between here in Lincoln and down there. And so they needed to be given a lot more
They
credit for
farmed
what
with
they ever
horses too.
received.
Yes, they did. Yes, they did.
I just happened to be at the Arthur sale. I was just a young kid, probably in the 60s. And why we went to the Arthur sale barn, I don't know, but there was a big tractor trailer pulled up. They said from the state school, had all the workhorses
Yeah,
that they were, doing away with all that.
yep. And if you look at Vandalia now, it's all falling apart. The barn's all,
Yeah, they don't do any of the farming down there whatsoever anymore. I mean, our prisons and different places like that used to be self-sufficient.
they're not now.
But
Or not
there's a
now.
law against it. Didn't the Illinois government issue some sort of decree that they
It's
can-
inhumane and cruel punishment to make them do this.
Right.
It's inhumane to make our folks here at LDC to do this. But thing about it is, by doing that, they were more self-sufficient, as I stated. They were making their own clothes. They were making their own linens. They had 6 that trained under a master cobbler to make all their own shoes.
They have their own barbers and everything.
Yeah, I
It
mean,
gave them
you're-
a sense of self-worth.
They
Yeah,
tried to
exactly.
get those kids to do and as much as they could.
work your mind, strengthen that mind, make yourself, like you just said, a sense of self-worth and pride. That, yeah, hey, I can do this.
'Cause
But
all
they don't
worked
do that
hard.
anymore.
There were people put there, probably back in the Depression, the family couldn't
Yeah.
take care of them.
Yeah.
They could- no,
Because
okay,
there
well,
was some of them, when it was closing down, or even before that they did testing and they weren't retarded.
There wasn't
at
a
all.
thing wrong with them.
My mother-in-law retired from there, and she said that there was a lot of them there that really didn't need to be there. Their parents dropped them off there and just said, "Here, you're gonna go here and visit for a little bit," and took off,
Never
and treated
came
it like
Never
never
come
came
back.
back, and
Yeah.
treated it like it was an orphanage.
Well,
And
I
just
used to
abandoned
teach
them
out
there, and
there.
they really didn't need to be there, and that's all they ended up knowing.
I said, I used to teach out there. I'd gone out there at least once every 2 weeks or once a month for over a year.
Right.
You're probably wondering what the state police is doing out there. But we were trying to teach them how to get along with people and how to back off. And I'd sit down and play games even with some of them.
Oh,
And,
yeah.
most of them I would call slow. They're not idiots.
Right,
Yeah.
They're
they're not.
slow.
Idiots are out in DC.
And they could,
Or in Chicago.
There you
Oh,
go.
well, okay.
I mean, you can ask Bill. I mean, he was a teacher. I'm sure that he had kids in some of his classes that were comparable to some of them that were out there.
Right.
And if
Right.
you go out to Sangamon County, out there by Lincoln Land, they got a school for nothing but misfits that other teachers don't want in their schools in Springfield. There's some of them that ought to be,
Right.
so, they did an injustice when they closed that place.
Yes, they did. Not only by closing it and having to move.
Not always, because these group homes, my wife worked out there. She worked with some of the kids that were out there. And then she was also a nurse consultant for these group homes. And she said it surprised her how much better acting and how much better they were mentally in the group home setting.
Oh, yeah. I
If they
mean,
were in a good group home, but I've taken kids at 2 o'clock in the morning to what you call as a family home, group home,
yeah.
that the only reason why those people are doing it is for the money.
Right.
They could care less for the benefit
Because
of
the
the
state's gonna
kids.
fund them on all this. But yeah, I mean, granted, with the group homes that are out in town, I mean, we have some here right now, that, yes, I mean, it would be a better environment for them. It would improve their well-being, but we still have those who cannot be in a group home like
Well, the
this.
group homes, they try to match up ability-wise.
Correct,
And
correct,
they either had to work or they had to go to workshop.
Yeah.
right.
You
You know,
couldn't sit at your, and lay around the house on,
Well,
even
that-
into your 80s.
oh yeah, you know, I mean, they had different programs was set up for them where they could go to different locations to work. But you know, you have those individuals who,
Some of them are actually really smart.
oh yes,
Oh, they are.
Yeah.
You know,
intelligent.
Jerry Davis, he went to work with pneumonia, he had torn cartilage in his knee, and you couldn't keep him from not going to work.
Yeah,
My wife used to work at one, and anytime she'd see one of them at Walmart with the rest of her group or whatever, and if he saw her, boy, he'd take off running for her, and he'd holler her name out,
Yeah.
and she'd tell the leaders that was with him, she's like, "I used to work at the home you guys were at." That's why he knows me, and he never forgot her, and he has since passed on, and we went to visitation.
well, I used to teach attorneys and judges on what the juvenile law was, because they don't get that taught to them in law school.
No, you gotta go
They
through
only
it separately.
learn what they have by hand out in the field.
Right.
And you'd be surprised how many attorneys and that don't have an idea of what's going on in juvenile court.
Right. Yeah.
My husband was an administrator out there in 1969 and 70.
Mm-hmm.
He was with the highest group, and a lot of them were juvenile delinquents from Chicago
Yeah.
that couldn't pass the test.
For
They-
school.
Yeah, and so they just put them down
Right.
here,
That-
and they
that
were
was
not
like-
dumb.
Right.
They just couldn't pass the test because they hadn't been educated.
Basically like an SAT. But
And
yeah, I
so
mean, that
what
was done in
in his
several locations like that across the
Yeah,
state.
It was a juvenile detention.
Yeah, well, look what we're doing now. I'm sorry, but it could be utilized otherwise. You know, I mean, no, I'm not even gonna get on that one.
Hey, when were the buildings out at the farm erected? Of course, they probably weren't all erected at the same time.
Right.
But when-
The actual, some of them began in 1887 itself, and then, yeah, I mean, they began in 1870s.
They want to close that.
But then, you know, I mean, they built the 10 buildings later for the colony that actually housed up to 620 men.
Yeah.
But I mean, that was after the farm had actually already gotten itself established, was already up and was going. And part of that funding that was received from the state to improve things, part of that was then utilized to build the buildings out at the farm that keeps the farm going. And I'm not sure how many of the actual buildings out there yet are still some of the original buildings out there, Lincoln Developmental Center. I'm not 100% positive.
Talking about from the farm,
Yeah,
they still, if you go out to the south annex of the park and drive back past there, they still have some of the old farm buildings they use as storage back
Really?
there on the backside of the, if you go in the fall and all the leaves are off the trees, you can see some of the old farm buildings through the trees and see some of the old buildings, they use them as like storage and stuff like that.
I know the state police had
On
a
the
few of those
backside.
buildings for storage.
There's not too many of them left. And the ones that are left, they're not too good shape.
Well,
They just kind of use them as storage, but
kind of getting dilapidated. And I mean, part of that right out here at the old LDC, storage-wise, for the prison, some of them buildings out there, I've got all kinds of storage in them. I mean, there's computers, everything else that they classify as outdated, upgrade them, quit spending their stupid cash.
But did the
Upgrade it,
city,
make it cheaper.
did the city of Lincoln go ahead and buy that facility? Because they was offered that entire facility and ground for $1.
no, the city wanted the state to give it to them.
Well, they wanted to give it
And
to them, they didn't want to pay
They-
$1. But the state has got funny rules, and you cannot give anything away, you gotta sell it. So
It
they
has to be
offered
at
it
least
to them
by a
for
penny.
$1.
Okay, yeah, they sold it, here was what we made for it. It has to have some type of value as being sold for it.
Yep.
But now, the last I'd heard, was one of those sales was at the old nursing home there on 5th Street. Was sold for a very short amount, and that's what they've now turned that community center into, and the actual aspects that they're wanting to get it set up for homeless veterans and rehab.
Hope on Fifth, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, Oak Point Fifth, yeah.
The old
Maybe they have
The old St. Clair's, yes.
yeah, what he was talking about with the cemetery, our former stepmom, her oldest daughter, she drove from East Peoria to Lincoln every day. She was basically what they would call severely autistic now. She was never able to be potty trained or anything like that. She died at 26. But, so she had her as a resident there. So she was severely mentally handicapped. But she drove from East Peoria to Lincoln every day and helped take care of herself, but she just didn't have the means to take care of her at home.
Yeah.
But they ended up burying her out there at the state school cemetery. But when her and our dad were together and moved down here, I remember going with them out there. She hadn't been out there for years because of the prisons. and whatnot. She asked what she had to do, and she had to call at least a week in advance to let them know she wanted to go out there, and how many flowers and what flowers she wanted to take out there, and it was a big hassle and ordeal to where she said, I'm never going again. This is ridiculous. And the guard that had to escort us out there had to stand so many feet near us and had to be armed and everything else, and it was pretty ridiculous.
You know,
It was a big
Yeah, it was a
ordeal.
big-
It's still like that out there,
Yeah.
but
she's
they're
like, "Well, I'm never
so
doing this
short-handed now,
Oh, yeah.
you may not get the day that you wanna go out there.
Right. I mean, this
You
was
may have
back
to
in
wait for a
the,
week.
this was back in the mid-late 90s. when that
Yeah.
went.
They're really short of, it used to be 100 prisoners for every guard. It's up to about 175 prisoners to every
For
guard.
each guard, yeah.
Yeah, I've talked to a lot of people that are pretty short-handed.
And I mean, it ain't gonna help any if they shut one of them down. It's gonna make it worse yet. So, but anyone else?
Well, you know, there used to be a lot of children out there that did need to be there.
Oh, yes, yes.
I was a student nurse and we got taken on a tour out there, and that would have been in the late 50s.
Mhm.
And the one I remember the most wouldn't happen anymore because there's a surgical procedure to correct it. But it was this baby that had hydrocephalus,
Mhm.
and literally his big head was almost as big as a card table. And of course, he could not be moved from the position he was in.
Right.
And he lived that way until he died.
Wow.
But of course, luckily now, you know, they do a neurosurgery that brings that.
Right.
They find it in the infancy, so.
Before it gets way out of hand and out of
yeah, it
control.
doesn't get right.
Do it in the womb.
Yeah, probably now,
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Chris. We've enjoyed listening to your presentation.
Very good.
We'll be giving you free membership for a year in the society for giving
When I was a nurse.
us this talk. And I did want to tell everyone, Rogine has gotten out some of the things that we have here on Lincoln Developmental Center, in case some of you are interested. First of all, the table from where Gary is sitting on down is all from LDC and was given to us when they closed. The podium came from LDC. We have dishes from LDC. We've got a large collection of materials. We have the books on the artists. We
Right.
have books written by other students that have come. We've had students past students come visit us here. We've got records on a lot of things. Here we've got scrapbooks that were made by the superintendent in his office. They're big ones. They're probably located in the back. I don't think you brought those out. No, but so if anybody wants to look up anything, we do have quite a bit of information here. And oh, we've got the over at tourism.
I'm just getting ready to mention
Yeah,
that. They got
yeah,
some over
they've
there
got
as well.
the copper box from the administration building is over there. Most of our postcard collection of the buildings is over there. The silver service from the administrator's office. Part of it's in our window and part of it's over there. They liked it so much, and people like it so much over at tourism. It's been there for over a year, and they like it and want it back if we take it out. So we left it over there on display. So there is a lot of interest yet in the Developmental Center.
Oh, yeah.
You might add also, make a big yell about keeping that prison open on
Oh,
that. Because you're gonna lose 400 or more people that ain't gonna have no place to
right.
go to work.
And Lincoln Christian University, last year for graduation, we no longer have Lincoln College. They shut this down up here. And one of the reasons why, part of the reasons why on with choosing Lincoln as far as the LDC, because of the economic basis that we were at, it raised it sky high. We had the extra railroad, we had the extra business, but we start losing, you know, out there, the Lincoln women, you know, on the women's side, isn't it? At the women's prison, of course, Lincoln College, no longer have Lincoln Christian University. We're gonna have people moving out of here, and we're gonna be, you know, lousy state for economic in this city. Bad.
Right. Well, thank you, Chris.
Yeah,
And
very good.
Bill, if you want to go ahead with the business.
she gets short.